In this video, we'll be looking at exercise 4.2, question 1e from New QMaths 12a. The response to this question regarding choosing samples involves a lot of writing, and writing in sentence form. So instead of writing it live in front of you, what I'm going to do is present a pre-written solution and talk about how I went about writing that solution, structuring the sentences, and deciding what to say and what not to say. Let's take a look at the question first. The question asks us to identify the population, some parameters, and some statistics for each of the following situations. And the situation I'm looking at is in part E. A large supermarket kept records of checkout operators. From 15 shift records selected at random, there were 4 operators with more than 5 errors, 3 operators with incorrect till totals, and 2 operators who had processed less than $10,000 in their shift. Reading that question the first time, I've got a bit of an idea about the context, and I can see that there's some numbers in there. But really, I'm not sure what I'm doing at this stage. So what I normally do is go back and reread the question again, trying to look at what kind of things I'm being asked to do, and remembering how that relates to the text that's come before in that section of my textbook. So maybe a good idea right now would be to pause this video yourself, read over the question, and have a look back through that section in the text as well. Try to set yourself up a plan as to how you'd go about answering this question. Here's some notes that I've put together after my second reading. The first thing I noticed was that the stem of the question tells me what I'm required to do. I'm required to identify, first of all, the population that's mentioned in the question, then some parameters that are identified, or possibly that I can figure out from what's talked about, and also some specific statistics that go with those parameters. Now remember that parameters are some sort of values that might be associated with the overall population, and statistics are versions of those parameters that apply for a sample that we're talking about. So we might also want to figure out what the sample is in this particular question, even though it's not asked for. As I read through the question, part E talks about checkout operators, possibly my population. They talk about how the large supermarket has kept records for 15 of those operators and their shift records. They seem to be selected randomly. Selecting randomly indicates to me that that might be the sample that they're talking about, because random is a way that we sample a population. Then we're given a bit more information. 4 of the operators made more than 5 errors during their shift. 3 of the operators had incorrect totals. And 2 of the operators had less than $10,000 worth of sales processed. Now really, all of this information is in the question, but by writing it down in these ways, I can start to join things up and figure out which parts of the question and its text I can use to answer my question. I might draw some links, for example, that the checkout operators probably forms the population in question. 15 of them, selected randomly, might be forming my sample. Some parameters, I might be talking about the number of errors made, or the total sales, or perhaps the number of or the amount of dollars that are processed in sales. Taking it a bit deeper than that, we could talk about parameters that might be the number of operators with greater than 5 errors, to be more specific. We can get really deep into this if we like, or you can just keep it at the surface level as well. The question doesn't really specify. It's up to you. For statistics though, we're asked to find some statistics that go with each of the following situations. Well, these 3 pieces of information are giving us something we can use here. Statistics, for example, that 4 operators out of 15, 4 divided by 15, are making more than 5 errors, or 3 operators out of 15 with incorrect totals. We can use this information to come up with the statistics that we want to report here. So let's put this together now in a fully worded sentence response. First thing I want to make sure that I answer is identify the population. So I do that with my first sentence. The population refers to all checkout operators at the large supermarket. You can see here that I've used a full sentence, and I've used the words of the question in my response. The population is, or the population refers to, and then stated what it is. Second, we're asked to identify some parameters. Well, again, I use the words of the question in my response. Some parameters. some parameters are, some parameters related to this population, or so on. Some parameters related to this population are the number of errors made, or, for example, if you wanted to get a bit deeper, the proportion of operators making errors, or the proportion of operators making a certain number of errors. Okay, we can get really deep into it, or we can just go with the surface of the number of errors. Another one was the value of sales processed, or perhaps, moving deeper, the percentage of operators achieving some sales target. And there's many more as well. Could have gone with incorrect totals as one of the other possible population level parameters. But again, you can see full sentence form. I'm using the questions, words of the question in my response. The final thing we're asked to do is report on some statistics for each of the situations. And here again, I'm using the words of the question and using full sentence form. However, I've decided to make it a little bit different and use bullet points as well, because I want to report 3 different things. I'm using bullets, but again, it's still in some sort of sentence form. So we've got some statistics for the sample of operators discussed, that's the 15 checkout operators that were talked about in the question, included 4 out of 15, or about 27%, of those operators made more than 5 errors. 3 out of 15 of them, or exactly 20%, processed incorrect totals. 2 out of 15, or 13%, approximately, of those operators processed less than $10,000 in their shift. These are some sample level statistics. They don't mean that all operators do these things at this rate, but based on the 15 shift records selected randomly, that's the statistic we have for our sample. So in summary, in terms of responding to this kind of question, we want to make sure that we use full sentences, and we also want to make sure that we're answering the question we're given. And the best way to make sure that you do this is to use the words of the question in your response.